Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chris Macpherson Show, your home of black and white opinion on your sporting landscape. No greys here, and we're looking forward to ripping into episode 30 and another bumper wrap around the grounds and a wrap throughout our sporting landscape as we talk across the UFC, the basketball, the cricket. We dig into the Formula One, we touch on some tennis, and of course go deep on the round ball action with the Australian football scene. There's plenty to get through, and of course, you should stay tuned for all of it and recommend it to a friend. Give it a like, give it a subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. Let us know what you think. Give us a rating or review. It'd be great to see. If you want to keep up to date with sports throughout the week as well, make sure you stay tuned to our social media channels. You can find us on Instagram, on TikTok, on X, and on Facebook. At The Chris Mac Show is the home for all of our social media. It's the handle to find us on. You can keep up to date with us there. But let's get rocking and rolling with this week's show. We're going to try and keep it snappy for you. And we are joined by none other than our Mr. Consistent, Lachlan Avil, coming on. And we're going to go around the grounds to get things underway. Lockie, welcome back.
Afternoon, Chris. How are we going?
I'm going very well, mate. We're here chatting sport. What's not to be good about, I suppose. Speaking of that, mate, we have no Brody Burrows this week, so we're going to deputise and we're going to kick the show off talking a little bit of UFC, and we've got UFC 315 on the horizon, and it's a card to be excited about if you're an Aussie.
I'll take your word for it, Chris. I don't know who's fighting. I am not the person who should be in this slot talking about the UFC, but I'm happy that you're excited about it.
Well, we could go into, a little bit of reason why you are the person that's deputising, and just throwing it back into my court. Brody Burrows decided that he'd use his jaw to collect someone else's arm on the weekend. He was lucky to get away with not being cited by the match commissioner, as I understand him, playing Aussie rules, and the umpire let him off with a caution because it was his dad, but Brody's a bit dirty. He didn't get a free. So, yeah, Brody hopefully will be back speaking to us with a full head of teeth next week.
Yeah, in the concussion protocols. So just by the rules of the league, he has to sit out 1 week of the show, but hopefully he'll come back stronger.
There's a few of the viewers that might argue that we all regularly appear like we're suffering from concussion protocol symptoms, but anyway. Obviously this one, as I said, Belal Muhammad is the defending welterweight champion. He will come up against Aussie Jack Della Maddalena, and this one is the headline act. It's, again, we always love seeing Aussies in these big fights, but this one's been a little bit vicious. The two of them been coming out, calling each other out as they do, but getting very personal in the lead up, which just turns the temperature up a little bit. But all he's going to do, Belal Muhammad, it doesn't matter whether he's right or wrong with his arguments. He's just going to get a whole population of Aussies offside because we're very patriotic when it comes to the Biffs.
Doesn't take too much to get a whole bunch of Aussies offside, does it? It's just one of those things, like all these fighting codes. How much of it is real? I don't know. How much is it putting it on? A little bit of entertainment, put on a bit of a show, get the rivalry stoked up before the fight is always a little bit hard to tell.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So Muhammad is nicknamed the Bully, and there's been some sledging going back and forward. Muhammad has said that Jack Della Maddalena will break within 3 rounds, and then Della Maddalena has come back and asked him where he actually got his black belt from and whether or not it's a real one or just a souvenir. So, it's interesting. I think the sum up from Muhammad was coming out when he Della Maddalena called Muhammad boring, and he came back and said, "Will it be boring when you're getting slammed on your head?" So really imaginative stuff from the boys, and maybe a few knocks to the head for these two as well.
Yeah, maybe. Look, it's good when there's always a little bit of tension in it, right? It makes these fights kind of mean more, and it's not just about, the art of the sport. That's one part of it, but the fact that you can go into these fights with two people who genuinely dislike each other, it always adds a bit more to it.
It sure does. And look, Della Maddalena on a tear of 17 straight wins, 7 inside the UFC octagon. It would be history for Australia if he does win, because it would be the first time we've had 2 concurrent champions in the UFC. We've got the Volk, obviously, having reclaimed the UFC featherweight crown. So we are behind Della Maddalena this Sunday. We can't wait to see how he goes, and we wish him all the best. Always good to see Aussies succeeding on the world stage, and hopefully he can take that to 18 straight wins. But let's pivot to something a little bit probably less serious, but I'm sure it was serious for those involved. Josh Giddey, obviously NBA off-season for him, but he just couldn't hang around without any basketball. It looks like he's about to sign a north of $200 million deal with the Chicago Bulls, but he was playing for love in downtown Frankston, just, only a few suburbs from you, mate, recently.
Yeah, and wasn't it like a Div 3 game or something as well? Like he didn't even pop in and have a go with the big boys of the local area. He's just literally just gone for a throw around with one of the lower Div teams. It's pretty funny, right? Like, can you imagine you're on the opposition team and you think of all the strange things that could happen when you show up for a casual game of basketball, and Josh Giddey rocking up at the other end for the other team is probably one of the worst scenarios.
I did love too on the team sheet. He's just listed as fill in, not PHIL. It was FI before. I think Glenn Maxwell might have had one of those when he rolled out in a second grade game last summer. So, mate, it's not what you want when you're going out to your local basketball court for a bit of hooping on a midweek night, and you're a little bit tight from work. You've been sitting in the office chair all day, and then you've got that young bloke over there with the curly hair, and you're like, hang on, that young bloke's Josh Giddey. What? Oh dear, it's going to be a long night. He put up about 20 points. The thing that was most astounding for me was someone on the other side put up 50.
Yeah, impressive. I mean, maybe Josh Giddey isn't the young Australian who should be playing in the NBA at the moment. If you can't handle Div 3 in Frankston, then what are you going to do in America?
I'm going to suggest that the bloke that put 50 up probably wasn't being defended by Josh Giddey.
Probably not.
But look, basketball, it is, as I said, for a lot of the players in the NBA, the season has wrapped up. We know the NBL season's in its off-season now. There's lots of different things happening. I did note too the collective bargaining agreement for the WNBL, which is going to push towards pay parity. So it's been a busy time in basketball, but most of the basketball focus, Lockie, is on the NBA playoffs. And as we head towards, this will be Thursday night, so this news will be a little bit old by then, but Boston headed in as really short price favourites against the New York Knicks to start their Eastern Conference semi-finals matchup this week. They led by, I think it was 16 points at half-time and somehow lost, despite being the short price favourites going into the game, lost in overtime. So some nervous times for Boston. Game 2 will be just have happened by the time this goes live on Thursday night. But good to see there's some competitiveness in these series, and it's not just a straight up start, because for 3 of the 4 brackets, the top 2 teams have gone through. We know in the bottom of the West, the Rockets and the Lakers bombed out, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I think the Timberwolves or the Warriors could be a cool story if they go through, but good to see the Knicks putting a bit of spice into the NBA playoffs.
Yeah, a pretty disastrous second half, really, from the Celtics. I think in the fourth quarter alone, it was a 9-point swing the other way to bring it back to even, to go into overtime. So, look, basketball is one of those games where the variance is high, right? That's why we have 7-game series. So occasionally, the favourite's not going to win every time, which is what we love about sport, right? So I don't think you'd be too concerned if you're a Celtics fan. You lose game 1, it's okay. It's pretty tight. You had a pretty poor second half of the game. You recover, you go ahead in the next one, and you're still expecting to get the job done.
Yeah, you would certainly expect it. But again, momentum can be a funny thing. I guess we'll wait and see as they play out, and look forward to having Ben Dunn back on in a couple of weeks to dig into that as we get to the NBA finals themselves. But let's move on and keep rolling as we go around the grounds, and we'll head from the basketball courts to the cricket nets, if you will, Lockie. And we're having a bit of a look ahead to the World Test Championship. We've got some of the Aussies playing over in the county cricket at the moment, getting a bit of a feel for the conditions. We know that we'll play South Africa at Lords, which is very exciting. For the first time in the World Test Championship, we'll be at Lords. And we've got some players that probably aren't the ones that are immediately in calculations. They're probably in that next tier who found some really good form recently. I talk about Marcus Harris at the moment. He's got another century for Lancashire in the county championship. That means Sam Constas now is under a little bit of pressure. Cameron Green's been thrown up as another person who could be in that top order, maybe replacing Marnus Labuschagne. Is there a thought from you? I mean, Green got that century at the start of the county stint that he had, but he hasn't really followed that up with a lot since then. So is it just sticking with the tried and true, kind of the 11 that finished out the Test summer here against India?
When is the World Test Championship? What's the date of it? How far out are we?
It's a few weeks. I think it's in June from memory. I can tell you the exact date. But yeah, it's
okay, so
got some time for people to throw down some last performances. Obviously, a lot of our players are over in the IPL, a lot of our bowlers especially.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to bring up. It's an interesting dynamic because you've got a lot of the probably locks for the Aussie Test team playing in the IPL, which is obviously a very different game. But the reality is, if we kind of rewind a little bit, that South Africa have ended up in this position because they've played a very different schedule to a lot of the other teams that were competing for them for this place in the World Test Championship. They literally played a series against New Zealand where they, sent a B team because they wanted to prioritise their home domestic T20 league. And they played a lot of other teams that are definitely not at the same strength of difficulty compared to the likes of India and England that missed out on this game. So the expectation, look, we can talk about these players a lot. Yeah, Cam Green's had a little good series here over in England. Marcus Harris, as you say, with that century. But even if you wiped out the top 7 or 8 Aussies and you picked a test squad from there, you still expect them to get the job done. So you don't have to go too extreme, I think. I think you probably play your tried and true, maybe 1 or 2 changes here and there, but even an understrength Aussie side should be good enough, yeah.
I think for me, the lineup looks very much similar to what's served us well for 2 years. Sam Constas being probably the exception of that. He's come in late as an opener, but I think, again, we go there. I think Hazelwood, you go with him as a one-off test if he's fit, and it looks like he is at the moment. So I think, unfortunately, like the likes of Scott Boland and Cam Green probably miss out, and they might be conversations that come into the future for us, but not the current. The interesting thing for our opponents, like you talked about them, Kagiso Rabada only a couple of days ago looked like he may not have been eligible to play. A recreational drug suspension. He had a provisional suspension that was then to be clarified what the full duration of that will be. But he has now been cleared to play in the Laws Society, and that's a big tick for the box of South African cricket fans, because he is one of the biggest threats with that ball in English conditions. He's going to be very tough for our team to face.
Yeah, he's been welcome. I think he's allowed to go back to the IPL now. He took a little bit of time off, but he's back into that competition. But yeah, he's a very important player, right? He's been one of the best bowlers in the world at test level for a few years now. Obviously, a little bit of personal turmoil. I think he's been cleared to come back to the IPL now. So hopefully, look, he's learnt his lesson. Cricket, world cricket and Australian cricket especially is not a stranger to having to forgive players for past transgressions. So look, hopefully he's learnt his lesson. He can move on, and it's going to be a much more entertaining clash with Rabada involved.
Certainly is. Whenever these sporting headlines pop up, I always find myself referencing Simpsons memes, and this just really has that judge there saying boys will be boys. It's not something that's necessarily impacted his on-field, but it isn't a great look. As you said, 70 tests, 327 wickets at 22, and he's got, out of the 80-odd players that have claimed 200 or more test wickets, his strike rate at 39.44 is almost 3 balls per wicket better than the next best, who's a guy by the name of Jasprit Bumrah. So, pretty phenomenal when you think how well he has bowled for South Africa over that period and being consistent. So, again, a danger man as we head towards the World Test Championship, and we'll watch with bated breath. Speaking of danger men returning and being available again from suspensions, Jannik Sinner is back, and surprise, surprise, he comes back in Rome and gets a hero's welcome, Lockie.
Yeah, timing is pretty convenient, isn't it? I'm sure our mate Christian Montigan would be pretty excited by this news. Obviously, he's a very good player. The question marks around his ban are still there, but he's back.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Again, I think with the levels that he was tested positive with, it's hard to argue that it was likely to be really impacting his performance. But many will argue, well, was it just at the low point that he was tested, or all these sorts of things? Was it just a convenient excuse? And it is interesting to see, but he's back now. He will be one of the favourites for the French Open. We will talk to Christian Monaghan in the coming weeks in the lead up to the French Open, and he'll be the man to pick it all apart. But the reason I probably raise this as much as anything, one, it's bizarre when a returning drug cheat. I mean, as you said, it's very convenient. He gets to return to his home country in the lead up to the French Open. But it's a piece too that we look at it in contrast to the Max Purcell ban.
Yeah, I mean, for the Max Purcell story, the key bit of information is that he unknowingly received some kind of infusion or something of a banned substance, right? It's the idea of Sinner's team being responsible and him not quite knowing about it and then receiving a reduced sentence. Well, Max didn't know about it either.
I think the challenge with Max is he admitted, so it wasn't actually a banned substance, it's the volume. So you're not allowed to have more than 100 millilitres of intravenous treatment of any substance, right, even, etc. He had 500 mils, and then there was messages that came out that sort of suggested that he was messaging another tennis player who hasn't been named, saying, do you think I can get away with this? Am I going to be in trouble for it, sort of thing? And then he eventually fronted up with it once he realised that it was going to, the toothpaste was out of the tube. But again, we're talking about an increase in vitamin load, which, yes, is against the rules, so there needs to be, a piece against it, versus an illegal substance. Irrespective of the levels, it really doesn't seem fair when the world number one, and we saw Iga's fiancé with the same thing, and we've seen other players, go and be rubbed out for multiple years. it just doesn't seem like it's a fair and just level in terms of how these things are judged. I know there's no perfect scale for it, but it's tough. Both of them should face a ban, but the fact that Max Purcell is facing 18 months and Jannik Sinner basically had a nice little sojourn for a couple of months, then comes back, just doesn't miss a Grand Slam, doesn't miss anything of any significance, doesn't seem equitable.
And I think, it's the timing around the Sinner one as well, right? You got the 3 months is 6 times less than what Max has got. Also, he doesn't miss a slam for it, as you say. So that helps. And then, with Max, yes, the kind of timing of it the context of him, kind of going, oh, can we get away with this? It looks a little bit worse, right? But yeah, it still kind of feels orders of magnitude more severe than what Jannik had to deal with.
Yeah, it certainly does. It seems like it's an uneven balance, and again, it doesn't look good when it's the top players, the ones with the most money and the deepest pockets, that are coming out on top. But unfortunately, that is what has occurred. But a big thank you, as always, to you, Lockie, for jumping on, pinch hitting. We can see you're a little bit under the weather still, mate. So we look forward to hopefully having you back fully fit and ripping and roaring next week. We will soldier on through the remainder without you. But again, good to have you on for Around the Grounds. Well, it's time to get into the show proper now that we've done our dash madly around the grounds. And speaking of dashing madly, there was plenty of mad dashing in the Formula One this week with 2 races at Miami, the sprint and the full F1 Grand Prix. And when we talk F1, we bring in our man from the ones and twos, our producer, JR Carter, our resident motorsport guru. Hello, good to have you back, mate.
Afternoon, Chris.
Well, there's been plenty that's happened at Miami. There was a sprint race that, I don't think we can take all that seriously. Lando Norris did win it ahead of Oscar Piastri, but Oscar took the main one, and that's what we want to talk about in the bread and butter of this.
Absolutely. So Oscar Piastri is now a 3-in-a-row winner now, which is sort of amazing for the Australian, and did it emphatically. Like, he led pretty much from start to finish. He got past Max in the first couple of corners. More importantly, Lando choked starting in that second place, so that was all sorts of fun as well. Hang on. Did Lando start second?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Moving on. So, yeah, we've seen some great racing from Oscar, though. Like, he just great racecraft and just held his nerve the entire way. So he had a difficult battle with Max to start with, but once he got past Max, he was away, and it was amazing to see.
It was interesting to see, as you said, like the McLaren's so clearly so much faster on this track. They were almost 40 seconds clear of the rest of the pack. Russell finishing in third, Verstappen in fourth after starting on pole. But again, Oscar just showed why he is the class, and it's the age of Oscar now. It's no longer the era of Lando.
The era of Lando Norris was never going to last. Like, we've seen that graph, and I haven't got it this week because it still hasn't quite caught up to where we think the next step is, which is Lando coming back after the summer break. But we'll see what happens there. But yeah, like, the other thing is, like, Max probably, like, while some people are saying, oh, Max did his race, like racing Oscar at the start, and like because of that, like he lost his third place because of that. I'm not sure that's really like the real takeaway is. We got to see actual racing for a lot of laps this race, which was great to see.
Yeah, it certainly is when we're seeing some racing, and again, there was some good racing back in the pack. And the other thing that stood out for me, JR, in this one is both Williams getting points, which is a little surprising considering what we've seen from Carlos so far.
Yeah, it looks slightly unheard of, but also not unheard of. Like, Williams is a quality unit, and like we were saying when we were doing buy sell a few weeks ago, like, they are definitely a buy. Like, they are something that's on the up and up.
They certainly are. It's interesting to see some of these lower tier teams starting to make some displays at different points. We've obviously seen the Haas of Esteban Ocon featuring the points a couple of times as well, so he missed out by a little this time around, but. Yeah, it's good to see a bit more of a mix. I think Ocon actually qualified inside the top 10, which was good to see. But yeah, again, it's all things Piastri at the moment. 3 in a row. He's got 4 wins this season. No one else has a double yet in the major races.
Correct. So, like, if Oscar can keep this up, particularly going to these couple of European races in a few weeks, so we've got the triple header coming up. If he can maintain that sort of momentum through there, this is his year. He can do it.
Yeah, I certainly think so. And then you look at the Constructors' Championship, and basically the gap between first and second is equal to the amount of points that Red Bull have in third. So that one's already, you can almost stop that fight already very early in the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Red Bull, even with Yuki in the seat, and Yuki's not doing bad. He's just not doing great either. And to the point where he's almost finished ahead of Max. He may have finished ahead of Max in the sprint. But we're not going to see them catch that gap up, like because they put those points on early, and the McLarens have been consistent. The Red Bull probably isn't in a position to ever catch that up.
Yeah, I don't see. Well, I mean, Mercedes are sitting in second at the moment, and that's realistically some heavy lifting from George Russell, really. But yeah, it's as you say, I can't see anyone catching that as it sits at the moment. It's a bit of a mess for those other teams, and it's going to be just looking at Oscar pulling out this season. But in terms of that, teams that aren't hitting well in the Drivers' Championship, Ferrari is one of those, and one of the biggest pieces behind that is Lewis Hamilton's underperformance.
Yeah, so Lewis is having a tough time of it at Ferrari. Like the transition has not been fun for him. The biggest takeaway though is just the communication problems at Ferrari that we've seen with Carlos last year as well are just back. So we've seen another of the "I'll come back to you." Ford versus Ferrari is a great example of you cannot win a race by committee. They need to make decisive decisions sooner than later because of what happened here. So for context, Lewis was on newer tyres, softer tyres than Charles Leclerc, and Charles Leclerc was directly in front of him and stonewalling him. Lewis requested to get past, which is a reasonable request given like his pace at the time. They went back and forth so long that Lewis blew his tyres out and just could not get any, like once they did actually let him past Charles, he just couldn't make any ground and they gave the places back. But it was very similar to what happened with Yuki and Danny last year. It's just wasted time. Be decisive. This whole "I'll come back to you" was really poorly received by Lewis, where he was asking if we're going to stop for a cup of tea here and there, and just he was on about it for a while. So I think both from a race car and from a racecraft point of view, and just like a communications point of view, Lewis is not where he wants to be right now.
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a debacle. And to be fair, watching back the key piece of the race, you feel that had Lewis got past Charles, look, he might not have got to the podium, but he would have well and truly, I feel like, been right up on the heels at least of Albon and maybe got past Albon. And so when you look at it as a team, that's 14 points versus 10 points. That's a big difference when it starts to come down to the business end of the season. We know how close it got for some of these, third, fourth, fifth and sixth places, and those prize money gaps are quite significant. So Ferrari need to sort their dramas out and do it quickly, as you said, become decisive, not just about their decision-making, but decisive when they're making those decisions too.
That's right.
Well, someone who has been rumoured to be decisive is the Alpine team, and it looks like it's all done for Doohan. Jack Doohan making way for Franco Colapinto ahead of the next Grand Prix at Emilia-Romagna.
Yeah, so Jack Doohan had another DNF in the main race. He's tangled with a person we will get to in a few moments at the beginning of the race and had to retire very early. Look, it's sad to see. Like we love having multiple Australians on the grid and having one that's dominating so much. But poor old Jack's just not having a great time at Alpine. He's had that shadow of Franco sort of since before the season started, and we always knew like it looked like he wasn't even on a full year deal. So this is probably when it's going to happen. There has been no official announcement as of yet.
Few moments later,
Franco Colapinto will officially replace Jack Doohan for the next 5 races. We'll have more news on this topic on next week's show. But let's talk about the person he crashed into, which is our mate Liam Lawson. Just to give you an idea, Liam's got a couple of options here now. Or he's not here to. He's not here to make friends because he keeps crashing into people. He's not here to get points because he's had none. And he's clearly not here to improve his reputation. Like Liam has been not great for the sport, I don't think. He's knocked one Aussie out. Now he's probably knocked another one out by default at this point as well.
I'm starting to wonder if Liam realised there's not a third Red Bull team. But I think speaking of Liam JR, and we're going to talk about Checo Perez second, and it's probably the perfect segue.
Yeah.
Mario Andretti summed it up best. So on the weekend, there was chants at the F1 Grand Prix around get Checo. When Cadillac came out with their driver suits and their livery for the car, they were asked about their drivers. They didn't want to commit to anything. They've got a list they're working through. But when they were talking about Checo Perez, Mario Andretti, who's obviously a legend of motorsport, came out and said, he's an option. He could be an option, of course. He could be an option. All I can say is that Liam Lawson is making Checo look very, very good right now.
Yeah, look, Checo was never the real problem. Like that Red Bull car is still the real problem, but Liam's he hasn't fired since he got even going back to the racing balls. Like he's just like Isaac Hadjar has bodied him time and time again, and Isaac is a brand of the future. Like he is another one of those from the last couple of weeks. Absolutely buy Isaac Hadjar. He has a future in the sport. I think Liam's going to be a one full season and done.
To be fair, even when Isaac had his moment at the Australian Grand Prix that went the wrong way, you were backing him. So I will give you credit for that because we do like to do drive-bys on your bet. But that drive-by by Mario Andretti is one of the best we'll see this season. I think it'll be a contender for quote of the year.
Absolutely. Like the only thing that could be better is like Gunther getting involved and like saying something derogatory, which surely is coming at this point.
Well, we were talking off air. We'd like to hear Gunther's thoughts on the man who was probably responsible for getting back to the story. And look, listeners, do yourself a favour. Go and read his Wikipedia page. It's better than fiction.
Yeah, that was some reading right there.
That was stunning. It's got supermodels, adoption, crime. It's a good read. Anyway, we'll leave you for the rest of that. But that's our F1 this week, JR. There's so much going on. We're going to take a breather. Next week we'll catch up and we'll see what those headlines are building into ahead of the Emilia-Romagna race. And the caravan and the circus continues on.
8 hours later.
Well, sometimes the breaking news gods are against you when you're recording podcasts and putting them to air a little bit later. Sometimes they're sort of with you, and we might lean to them being sort of with us this week, JR. After we recorded, the next day, we managed, before we get the release out this week, to get some breaking news about the Alpine team, which just throws some spanners in the works.
Yeah, it does. So Alpine announced this morning, Australian time, that Oliver Oakes has resigned from his role as team principal. He will be replaced by Flavio Briatore, who is, like, as we were talking just moments ago, something of a character within the F1 paddock and something of a character like that probably belongs in some sort of like espionage novel.
Yeah, it's crazy when you have a look at that, and I'll get onto Briatore in a minute, but I just want to have a look at the Renault/Alpine team principals. This is the 6th person to be in that role since 2020, and Briatore now comes in an acting role. Like, there is obviously, it's like when you start having lots of run-ins with everyone, you start going, well, maybe the individuals aren't the problem, maybe the team in this case is. There's so much going on, and to that point, there was the almost somewhat confirmed rumours that Jack had been moved on. And now this all throws question marks, shade and shadows over that.
Yeah, so like we seen this with Otmar a couple of years back. Otmar really pointed a lot of fingers at like Alpine doesn't know who's leading who. Like the main gist of it is the team principal doesn't have control over the team itself, where HR was answering back to Renault, and things like that were happening. So he could never make a decision on his own. There's some great conversation we'll probably have around the A-Leagues later about like coaches being in positions like that where they just didn't have the resources to go for it. Probably the big takeaway from this is it actually puts a question mark over the whole Jack Doohan news, where which way is that going to go? Because I think we can work out what position Oakes was in based on what happens next. If Doohan goes, Oliver Oakes was his backer. If Doohan stays, Oakes was against Doohan staying. So that's probably where we're at right now. We're going to find out more about the inner workings just based on what their next step is.
Going to be interesting, as you say, and I think, as you say, it'll shed some light on that. And again, time will tell. But remembering, as we go to air, we're now essentially just over a week from the next Grand Prix. So it's a circus that moves quickly, and again, it's just hard to think that, all of these things are coming out mid-season. These are things that should be wrapped up and dealt with between seasons. But again, not the first time. A number of those previous team principals for Alpine have either left mid-season. We've had drivers leave of their own volition and walk out, and names as well: Oscar Piastri, Daniel Ricciardo, Fernando Alonso. There's no better basket case than this, and we'll get on to Briatore and his ability to run a team in a moment.
Yeah, look, it's one of those things where Oscar really dodged that bullet, by getting away from that team as soon as possible. And a lot of that comes down to the influence Mark Webber had over him, where Mark was part of that whole no one knows what's being run. Mark knew that he couldn't really be at a low end team just after his experience at Williams before going into Red Bull. He needed to get Oscar into a actual functioning team sooner than later, and did so. So it points to Webber's management of Oscar Piastri getting him out of that absolute shit show which was erupting.
Well, it certainly paid dividends for him now. Unfortunately, sometimes when these young guys need to get a start in the industry, they need to take the lowest spots on the totem pole. But we'll see how that plays out for Jack Doohan, I guess, as time. He may not be employed next week. He may be, and who knows how stable that's going to be, even from a team point of view, let alone job security point of view as we go forward. But I want to talk about Briatore and his ability or fitting nature to be team principal. This is a guy who was for life. What overturned his ban for life from F1? He was involved in Crashgate. He was involved in the 1994 launch control controversy with Benetton. He has been dogged by controversy in both his F1 and non-F1 career. He was on the run for a period of time before those convictions were quashed. He was hiding in the Virgin Islands. He's failed school twice. He's had unsuccessful businesses early in his life. The man's nickname is literally translates to trouble. Like, how is this man a fit person to run a multi-billion-dollar F1 team?
Look, it just boggles the mind. Like, we won't go into the shady side of things, but it just looks like I know F1 is in need of characters. Like with the loss of Danny Rick this year and like a few others of those. Like, I know Drive to Survive needs content. This isn't content. Like, this is reality. Like, this is actual reality. Like, these things. Like, what's he doing in the sport?
Yeah, it's bizarre, and again, there's so many sports that talk about having a, fit and proper person to, be in certain positions of power with teams and businesses and franchises. And, he's either the world's most unlucky man or a very questionable character or somewhere in between. But anyway, he will be the team principal. I might overlook all of those terrible imperfections if he can keep Jack Doohan in a job and, keep his career going, though. So we'll wait and see.
Absolutely. And look, at the very least, like, we might see some entertainment. Like, Gasly and Doohan were both very apologetic in the post-race press conferences. Doohan's claiming no one's to blame. Liam Lawson is, of course, to blame for that crash. But other than that, like, they're just trying to get on with their racing.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing that Alpine and the F1 circus can do is to get back out there to Emilia-Romagna and get racing. And imagine the story if somehow, they picked up some points in their next race. And I'm sure Flavio will tell us that it was all his doing. But, hey, he can obviously sell ice to Eskimos. This is the man who's dated Naomi Campbell, Heidi Klum, and other models throughout his time. The bizarre world, and the F1's the most bizarre of the sports world some days, JR.
Absolutely it is.
Well, we move from the F1 track to the round ball action, and unfortunately, due to a little health incident, we've lost Lockie Avil for the time being, but we've had a very able replacement. He returns, Harry Scobie from Newey Jets Football. Harry, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, really happy to be here. Thank you for having me on as the final series approaches.
And there's plenty happening in the A-Leagues more broadly, and that's where we're going to focus our attention today. And there's one bit I know you're going to be very passionate about in this early piece, and we're going to talk coaching movements. There's been a few movements already. Lockie and I talked last week about Carl Viart moving on. We saw Ufak Talay and Giancarlo Italiano extend, which was quite ironic because obviously, as we'll get into later on, the finals race didn't pan out in the way you might think based on those decisions. But we've seen some more coaches moving on and coaches being signed for new gigs. And the first of those is a former Newcastle Jet in Ruben Zadkovic, who has been moved on from another A-League club. You have to feel, Harry, that Ruben's probably be challenged to find another gig at the moment, certainly in the short term.
Yeah, especially based off his coaching record. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Raw, they built some confidence towards the back end of the season. They strung a few wins together, but that start of the season wasn't particularly great, and I think that's what Raw fans were most frustrated with, was that start to the season. Their record, home and away, was pretty poor. And on to Zadkovic himself, he's the sort of guy that spoke in the last press conference of the season about how things weren't looking too great with the ownership and whatnot. So I think this has probably been coming. I think I probably wasn't expecting Zadkovic to head into another season with the Raw, and like you mentioned, it probably will be hard for Ruben to find another club, but yeah, challenging times for the Raw, but obviously they've recruited quite well, and that's been announced pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, it certainly has. I think Ruben might end up finding himself maybe an assistant gig somewhere else if he's going to pursue managing for the long term. We obviously know he knows football, and as you said, 4 games undefeated to finish the season, but it was too little, too late to drag him off the bottom of the ladder. But they will now, as you said, move on to a new manager, which will be Michael Valkanis, who was appointed only a matter of hours ago, and probably not a name that's familiar to a lot unless we're very much studious of the A-League. He replaced John Van Schip about 2016-17 for a couple of months at the end of the season as Melbourne City's interim manager, essentially, but has plenty of experience coaching in a couple of really decent leagues as an assistant manager. I think assisted with Greece as well. My only concern here, or two concerns, are one, we heard what Ruben Zadkovic obviously said about the club and maybe the lack of resources that have been applied, so hopefully they're going to change that. But two, he's just left Turkey and a club that's just been relegated, so maybe it's time for a fresh start, but he is an Aussie returning home, which is always a good story, seeing an Aussie coming back from Europe.
Yeah, that's what you want. Like you mentioned, I don't know too much about him, so I'm keen to see what he can build with this Raw side. But having a team that's just been relegated and coming straight to Australia is different. I'll say that. But to the Raw, I think, he's made it clear that he wants to establish the club more further, and we obviously spoke about those issues that they had last season with the background staff. So he'll be looking to change that and have a successful season next season with the Raw.
Yeah, I think he certainly will be looking to refresh a little bit there. Valkanis didn't have a great time with that club in Turkey, got let go mid-season before they were relegated. But again, he's grown up in Australia. He grew up and went to school in Melbourne. He's had time with Adelaide and Melbourne City. So hopefully he can turn it around, because Brisbane haven't had the best run of it most recently. He even played in the A-League in the early days with Adelaide United, I think. So we wish him all the best, and we want to see a nice competitive competition next year. So hopefully that sees Brisbane and a couple of other sides on the improve. And Harry, one of those sides you'll be hunting some improve for is the Newcastle Jets, who we've both got a nice affiliation with. And they've also confirmed this week a new head coach in what was probably not a well-kept secret.
Yeah, it was rumoured for a while now. And I think, towards the back end of the season, fans did want an answer as to how quickly the decision would come out. But I think it was always expected that the decision probably wouldn't have been announced until after the last regular competition game of the season, which was against a Victory. And I think, it's positive. We probably won't touch too much on Stanton, but to Milligan himself, I mean, record speaks for himself. He probably hasn't had a decent run of head coach. He's assisted Colby at Adelaide, and I think been over in the Netherlands, maybe. I think I'm correct. So he's got a little bit of coaching experience, but this is a huge opportunity for him to lead the club that he did play for a patch there in its early days. So, really excited to see what he can bring, and hopefully some new signings as well.
Yeah, well, he's talked about wanting to manage the core, and we know there's some positive shoots there. We saw some really good form at times from the Jets, and as you say, irrespective of what you think about the job Rob Stanton did, it is time for a change. The club have decided, and look, Milligan's playing record speaks for itself. As you said, he's played here. He's played in a lot of places. He's just been working most recently as an assistant in Malaysia. So there's opportunities for him here, and the club are saying they're going to put more resources behind him, which there's probably been the common thread between these two new managerial appointments is both these clubs, their existing managers have made points in regards to the challenges they had doing the job in terms of restrictions that were either placed on them or they were limited in, what resources were given to them. So you hope that both Mark Milligan and Michael Valkanis are set up for as much success as they can, because as we've seen with the likes of Ruben Zadkovic and Rob Stanton coming into probably smaller budget and market teams with Newcastle and Brisbane, it can be a challenging piece if you don't, have everything at your disposal that would be within that small budget if you're further restricted again. So we'll see what happens. Again, as I said, I think the A-League's in its best position when there's turnover of the top teams, and we know that a couple of big market teams are generally going to be there. We'll talk about Sydney FC not necessarily being there in a minute, but I think that's what we'd hope for. Even if you put a neutral hat on, that both Newcastle, Brisbane, Perth, these sorts of sides that have had some tough years, they get some more positive shoots in the next couple of years.
Yeah, you're definitely right. 100% agree, especially with the low budget thing. I think it's always going to be tricky for Zadkovic and Stanton to come into sides that haven't made finals in quite some time. It's challenging for both coaches, and like you mentioned, it's just about now the clubs making sure they do have good resources for these coaches to have success, because they're two clubs that want success, deserve success, and just haven't featured in the finals for a while now. So, definitely spot on. I don't think Zadkovic and Stanton had it easy, but there's definitely changes to be made for next season, and let's hope they get in place.
Yeah, 100%. Let's hope they get in place. And as you say, it'll be interesting to see, and maybe an adjustment in expectations that it was in their early days and a bit of leeway as they find their feet, both Milligan and Dalcarnis, rather than just a continuing merry-go-round in the coaching world. Let's move our attention to the men's competition, because despite these things happening for teams out of contention, Harry, the finals are upon us. The men's final round is in the bank, and Lockie and I talked it up last week. There was all these sorts of weird and wonderful permutations if Sydney won against Melbourne City, and then a few upsets happened, but the higher ranked teams on the ladder won pretty much most of the games outside of Brisbane beating Central Coast. So it was kind of going to script quite a bit. I mean, Perth got another win as well, which was kind of a bit of a quirky one, but their game didn't have a lot of relevance for either side. It just played out that way. Melbourne and Newcastle had a draw, but that game didn't actually have any relevance to absolutely anything by the time it happened. So it was a very anticlimactic final round, really.
It was an interesting round. I think, like you mentioned of your chat with Lockie last week, there was plenty of scenarios that could have occurred, but I think there wasn't too many changes when we look at the ladder. I think, like you mentioned, the Victory Jets game, that had nothing to play for. Western Sydney got the points over Macarthur. They're looking strong heading into the final series. But like you mentioned, Melbourne City as well, smashing Sydney. I probably wasn't expecting that. Sydney fall out of the finals. But City, yeah, they're another team in good form. But the scenarios going into this round were incredible. And I think, yeah, the ladder didn't change too much. A couple of surprise results towards the bottom of the ladder, like you mentioned, Perth. But overall, that top six probably deserves to be there. I think wouldn't have any complaints with it.
I think if memory serves me correctly, no one moved places over that round, which was quite interesting considering how tightly packed it was. And, Auckland obviously... Melbourne City eliminated Sydney with that comprehensive win early on Saturday. Then Western United, once they got that win over Auckland, third was locked in. Western Sydney sealed it all up on Saturday night. And then we went into Sunday, as you say, sort of knowing that neither of the games had any real relevance. Wellington probably already had an eye on Mad Monday, and Perth managed to get a couple of points on the long road trip, 3 points on the long road trip, which is a nice finish for them to the season to add a bit more respectability. But as I said, it was kind of just teams going through the motions. The top teams 2 through 5 showed us why they're where they are. Auckland, understandably, kind of probably didn't have their focus on the ball, and you can understand that. They'd already won the Premier's Plate, and they'll now turn their focus to trying to make it a double. But Melbourne City, as you said, not only eliminated Sydney, but secured that AFC place as well, which is a huge result for them.
Yeah, massive for City. I think defensively this season they've been a lot better, and that's probably an area where they probably lacked a bit last season. And they deserve their second spot. They're a team that doesn't get probably spoken about a lot, but they each game they're winning, and they're also finding the back of the net as well. I think we had doubts about how their attack would look because the likes of Lecky's still out injured, Andrew Naboot, Jamie McLaren left last season, but these youngsters like Max Caputo, Marco Tilio even has stepped up this season, and they fully deserve their AFC spot.
They certainly do, and again, we saw 2 youngsters when you speak of that share the golden boot, both I think less than 21 years of age, so the youngest and third youngest respectively in the history of the A-Leagues to win the golden boot, Adrian Segicic and Craig Goodwin. So, there's a nice little bit of pride there for the Newcastle guys to cling on to. Sorry, Archie Goodwin, not Craig Goodwin, dear me. Archie Goodwin and Adrian Segicic. So well done to them. And again, another young name there, Noah Bodic and Milanovic as well. So lots of young stars really making a name for themselves.
Yeah, I think to our old Newcastle boy Archie, I think he's been on fire. It's not the way he would have liked to end his season with that hamstring injury that looks like it's going to keep him out for the finals. And Segicic, I think, towards the side of the season, he wasn't really in Ufuk Talay's starting 11, but as the season's grown on and injuries have occurred for Sydney, he's really stepped up. And I don't think for Segicic, not only is he won the Golden Boot, he's also absolutely scored some screamers as well. Like some of his goals this season have been top notch. So yeah, fair credit to both the youngsters.
Yeah, I think Segicic, as you say, has scored some absolutely wonderful goals, but also some key goals when they've been trying to fight back or turning draws into 3 points as well. And sometimes there's a bit of added sauce and added value on a goal when that's the way they're being scored. He's a real clutch player, and I can't wait to see how he develops over the next little bit. But let's move our focus on to this weekend, and we've got the men's semi-finals series getting underway. And again, as you can see from on screen there, the elimination finals. So Friday night, Western United will host their first ever men's A-League finals out at Ironbark Fields. They'll host Adelaide United. It is straight elimination, so not a lot of value for Western United if they can't leverage that home ground advantage. And then again on Saturday night. We'll see Western Sydney Wanderers host Melbourne Victory. I'm really expecting a massive crowd for that second elimination final, Harry.
Yeah, CommBank as well. I think the way the Wanderers have finished this back end of the season has been incredible. I think 14 undefeated, if I'm right. And I think, like you said, against a team like a Victory, they don't have the greatest of rivalries as well. They don't like each other. So I think CommBank should be rocking. I'm expecting a huge crowd as well. And Friday night's clash, Western Adelaide. I think the last time Western United featured in the finals, if I'm right, I think they went on to win it, the grand final, 2-0 against Melbourne City. So a huge night for them at Ironbark Fields. But yeah, hopefully great turnouts for both games.
Fingers crossed. I mean, Ironbark Field doesn't have quite the capacity that Western Sydney or CommBank does, but hopefully it's full to the brim with the Western United fans. I'm sure there'll be a few Adelaide fans that'll fly or drive over. And then just for clarity for everyone, even though it looks like it's a straight play through from there for the winners, it is actually, if you read the fine print there, the lowest elimination final ranking. So if we were to say Adelaide and Melbourne Victory went through, that would be Adelaide would be the lowest. But whoever's lowest ranked out of those two winners will play Auckland in a 2-leg semi-final over those next 2 weekends after that. And the highest ranked of them, which if they go through as they are placed currently on the ladder, would be Western United, would then clash with Melbourne City. So basically, the only thing we know is that if Adelaide come through, they'll definitely play Auckland. If Western United come through, they'll definitely play Melbourne City. Then it depends on the other results. So we'll wait and see how that shapes up. Who do you like this weekend, Harry, in these two games?
I think with Western United, like you mentioned, it's not a ground known for huge atmosphere, but I think their home record this season has been quite well. They've kept teams at bay, and I'm backing Western. I think Adelaide, it was a bit of a mixed back end of the half of the season. They really dropped off and could have found themselves, to be fair, out of the finals quite easily. Towards the start of the season, they were fighting, they were in contention with Auckland to win the premiership, but just don't know where Adelaide's confidence is at the minute, where I feel like Western United, they've strong wins together. They're used to Ironbark Fields now. So I want to go for Western on Friday night, maybe a surprise for some. And then Saturday, I'm really keen to keep an eye on it, but I think Wanderers should just get up at home.
Yeah, I think Saturday's more of a challenging one for me. As you said, I think Adelaide has sort of stumbled into the finals, and I don't want to denigrate from them being there, but I feel like those top 5 sides were clearly better. But again, we know on 90 minutes of football, it becomes a really challenging affair. So interesting to see. But yeah, I'll be leaning Western United. I'm going to go with the two home sides, Western United and Western Sydney Wanderers. Wouldn't stun me completely if Victory came through, but if Adelaide would have been able to come through, especially without their leading scorer in Goodwin, I think that's going to be an interesting piece. I think that's just going to be probably a bridge too far. I think Noah Boddick's going to be, him and Ibasuki have been absolutely electric for Western United this year, and I think they'll be too strong. So we will see how it shapes up, but we've still got a few weeks left. And as you and I were talking about off air, not only have we got this going on, the Australia Cup final preliminary rounds are starting to heat up as well. So there's lots of football to come. We're going to roll into those when the season finishes up. We've got the playoffs, which the Australia Cup playoffs as well, which coincide with the finals. So lots of really exciting stuff to happen. We'll wait and see how that all shapes as we go. One thing else that we have is the women's finals. The dub is still continuing on. They're a little bit in advance of the men's, and as you can see there, Adelaide and Central Coast have made their way through, and they are up for the second legs. And Lockie and I were talking about this last week. I said I thought Central Coast might be able to fan a little bit of a flame against Melbourne City for the first leg, but whether or not it can be 2 legs, I certainly don't see Adelaide turning around a 3-1 deficit at Melbourne Victory, even though, again, it'll be a smaller crowd. And I just think Melbourne City, we've seen what they've done. They've been undefeated throughout the season. I think they're going to be too strong, and their championship mettle will show in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you again there, Chris. I think despite Mariners' remarkable season, I've been really impressed with Central Coast and Emily Husband's team. I think it's probably a good position to be in, especially being down 2-1 at half-time for the Mariners. They're probably it's not the worst position to be in, but it's still all to play for in Melbourne. But I think City have been there. They've proven that they're finals bound each year, and they've seemed to always prevail. So I'll go for City, just based on pure experience. And in the original rivalry in the women's, I think, you can't see Adelaide turning around the deficit. I think Victory will be too strong, and I think the 2 Melbourne sides will progress to the final.
All Melbourne final we could be looking at. I mean, wouldn't it be a wonderful story? We saw Central Coast last year pull that upset in the first week of the finals and get through, as did Newcastle, and then they both sort of couldn't get it done over 2 legs. And it's the great thing about the 2 legs, it really does allow the class to shine through. Central Coast, as you said, managed to come from behind and then hang on for a draw in that game at Gosford in front of nearly 2,000 fans. But yeah, it's going to be a very different story on the road. I think Melbourne City they're so composed, so classy. They'll just be able to push the accelerator. They did enough last week to make sure they didn't get their first L of the season. But yeah, I can't see. And even if Central Coast can hang level with them again, once you start getting to 120 minutes, those sorts of things, I just start to see that class of Melbourne City showing through. It'd be wonderful if it could go to extra time just for a bit more theatre.
Yeah. I think, City Mariners is definitely going to be the more entertaining clash just because of the way the score was in the first leg. But I think, especially at home as well, I think Melbourne City should get the job done. They've been there before. Don't get me wrong, like Emily Husband will have the Mariners fired up for this one. They're a young side, but I think experience will get the better edge of the Mariners in this one.
Yeah, you would certainly expect so, but it's going to be an absolute cracker. I think they both will be good games on their own 90 minutes of merit. But as always, we appreciate having you on, Harry. A big thank you, mate. Is there much on the cards for Newey Jets football over the off-season, or are we just taking a little bit of a breather?
I'll probably say more of a breather, to be honest, getting around to some MPL games, enjoying a bit of that and shaping up for what should be a huge season, not only for the A-Leagues, but for our Newcastle Jets as well. So plenty of planning will go on in the off-season. Hopefully it's a successful next season. But, yeah, not too much happening just yet.
Oh, mate, enjoyed a little bit of a break. We look forward to talking some more football undoubtedly throughout parts of the off-season with you as we quickly enough turn our eyes to next year. But again, thank you again for popping onto the show. And if anyone wants to check out some of your previous content, Newey Jets Football on social media is where to find you.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Thanks, Chris.
Well, what an episode. We've had some real bumps along the way. We've had interrupted breaking news. We've had a co-host drop with illness. But we've managed to soldier on and bring you all the black and white in your sports. No grey here. A huge thank you to Lachie Avil, firstly, for battling through his illness to get a chunk of the show done. To Harry Scobie for jumping in last minute and filling in and covering off the A-Leagues so well for us. To JR Carter for bringing his absolute best as our producer and also across the F1 and with the breaking news pinch hitting back in as well. It just gives you an idea of the wonderful, wonderful world of sport that we get to cover week in, week out and bring to you. Just make sure you do subscribe to our social media channels to keep up to date with things that happen in between the shows because there's so much that's happening and we'll be endeavouring to bring you more content. You can find us at The Chris Mack Show on X or Twitter, however you prefer to call it, Facebook, Instagram and on TikTok. We look forward to bringing you more of your favourite sports in the coming weeks. Let us know what you'd like us to be covering, who you'd like to see on here. If you've got favourite podcasters you think could do really well bringing in some insight to other sports on our show, let us know. Get involved in the comments or send us a message through our social media channel. Slide into those DMs. But for the meantime, make sure to subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. Give us a rating and review. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit the bell down below so you get those notifications. But until next week, we look forward to bringing you the black and white of your sport. No grey again in 7 more days.